You may have noticed up to now I haven't done any cold cases or true crime about minors. And that's because I am a dad, so it cuts quite close to home. And I find it really hard to write the stories, listen to the stories, read the stories, let alone to actually tell you about the stories. But today, we're coming out of my comfort zone and we're telling the story of Patricia Morris. Patricia Morris was 14-year-old and she went missing during school hours. Before we get started, let me just say hi. I'm Harley. This is All I'm Saying Is, here we tell stories about everything strange and wonderful, and we also do one true crime cold case every week. Patsy, or Patricia Morris, was born on the 10th of January 1966, and then when she was about 13, in 1979, her and her family moved from Birmingham to Isleworth, and that's in southwest London, obviously England, UK, and she attended Feltham Comprehensive School with her sister and her two brothers. I didn't really see much information about her life, but as far as I'm aware, she was a normal teenage girl. Then on the 16th of June 1980, age 14, Patricia Morris just went missing from school. And she didn't have permission from her teachers or her parents or anything, but she just left school at dinner time, and then she disappeared. Her friends claim the reason she left school that day is because it was a stormy day and she'd forgot her coat. So at lunchtime she was drenched through and she decided she was going to go home, get changed, some dry clothes, put a raincoat on and come back to school. A family friend and neighbour did confirm that she'd forgot her coat and as a result she was soaking wet through. The neighbour also said that she believes that she'd come home and realised that she hadn't got a key, so then she turned round and she crossed the heath of Hounslow, gone across the heath on her way to where her dad worked, which were the cavalry barracks, and she was going to go and get a key off him and then carry on with the plan of getting changed, get a new coat and then go to school. However, there is also somebody from that school, I think it was a pupil at the time, that said, well, not really. Patricia had quite a big habit of skipping history. And that afternoon she had a double history lesson, so they think that she just wagged school. She just decided to skip them lessons. But obviously, there's not any evidence to back that up, because what sort of evidence would be to back that up? Unless she's not going to write a note saying, "Hi miss, I'm just not attending your lesson." So it's either one or the other. She definitely left a coat at home, but was she going back to get it, or was she just genuinely skipping lesson? A witness came forward and said they saw Patricia near Patricia's house not long after noon, and then another witness came forward saying at 20 past 12 or 20 to 1, that 20-minute gap surrounding half 12, they saw Patricia crouching in a bus stop, and this bus stop was 1.7 miles away from Patricia's house. But obviously, if you go over the heath, there should be a map up at some point. If you go over the heath, I imagine that'll be shortened down to about a mile. I'm not quite sure. But them two sightings, the sighting that the witness thought they saw near a house, and the sighting that a witness thought they saw in a bus stop, was the last two potential sightings of Patricia. Not long after she was reported missing, a large search operation began. They had hundreds of police officers, they had helicopters, they had lots of members of the public all out volunteering to help. 2 days later, on the 18th of June, Patricia's body was found by a police dog handler, which was obviously looking for her, and they found her on Hounslow Heath. For anyone that didn't know, because I didn't know when I started doing this, I'd heard the word heath quite a lot, but heath's a bit much unused land. It's a bit overgrown. It's just an empty field that's been left unattended. Patricia's body was found face down in a small group of trees at the side of the path just going into the heath. This position is located just next to a golf course, and it's about a quarter of a mile from where she was living. And not only is it a quarter of a mile away from where she was living, it is also on the path from her house to her dad's house at the cavalry barracks. So the suggestion that she would go into the cavalry barracks to meet her dad to get the key is a viable suggestion, because like I said, it's quarter of a mile from her house in the direction of going to her dad's. When she was found, she was fully clothed and she'd been strangled with a ligature. Police found that day she was wearing 2 pairs of pants, and this is absolutely unknown why. I didn't come across any information about that other than that statement, and that statement was always followed by "for unknown reasons." And I do get quite a lot of relief in knowing that she wasn't sexually assaulted. There was no sign of sexual assault whatsoever. After a body had been found, the police actively told parents and put out a message to not let the children cross this heath or go near this heath unattended, because it could be potentially dangerous. Patricia's mom said that Patricia had no reason to be on Hounslow Heath and she didn't know why she'd be there. Here's a direct statement from what she said. "We can't understand what she was doing on the heath. She was always told not to go there and never disobeyed our orders." End quote. It wasn't unknown for women to have been attacked or even killed in the area surrounding the heath, but this was the first time, literally the first time ever, that somebody had been attacked or killed in that area that didn't involve rape. Police went on to question all of Patricia's classmates to find out what her movements were, to find out if there was anything going on, or find out if she was meeting anyone. Just any information that her classmates could bring forward. The police went through and questioned them all. On the 22nd of June, 4 days after Patricia's body had been found, 6 days after Patricia had gone missing, a police detective said, "We think that a youngster's playing truant and not telling us any information, and that information could be very vital and could be holding important information of the murder." Then, not much longer after that, Patricia's dad received a threatening phone call. The caller that made the threatening phone call has still not been identified. Nobody knows who he is or where he was phoning from, but her dad said that this boy was definitely a young/teenage boy, and it was definitely local. He had that local sound about him. He was a local lad. In December 1980, the police appealed for the driver of a blue van with a radio telephone to come forward. This was because a man had been seen on the telephone near Patricia's home around the time of the murder. So I don't think they were expecting him to be the murderer, but they thought it's very likely that he'd have seen her or he'd have seen someone acting dodgy, and they just wanted to talk to him to find out if he'd seen anything. Because obviously sometimes you see things and you don't think of it, but maybe that day he only saw one person. But either which way, he'd never come forward. At this point, the police had also tried to contact all the people that were playing golf on a nearby course. There were 22 people who were trying to get in contact with, but they'd only managed to contact 9. And they were also appealing for information about a man that had been seen. He was 5'10", he had dark grey hair, and he was wearing a dark suit. Again, that doesn't come up anywhere in the research I found, so I doubt he came forward. He is one of these where there's lots of little leads that don't really go anywhere. 16 years later, in 1996, the case was reopened and a man was arrested. The police were acting on new information, and they raided the man's house at dawn on the 8th of July 1996. The man was arrested subsequently at Hounslow bus depot, and at the time he was 33-year-old, which means he'd have been 17 at the time of the murder. And then he was released on bail, and then he was re-interviewed the following month, and then 2 months later, in October, he was released from police custody on bail again. And the police did then apply for the CPS to press charges, but for some reason the CPS didn't. Now, for many reasons, CPS had decided not to press charges. This is quite often because, obviously, they can't just keep passing nonsense court cases to the court. So, they'll quite often, if there's not enough evidence, they don't think to convict somebody, they won't bother. There's lots of reasons that they could do it, and there's lots of reasons that have happened in the past. But at this occasion, the CPS said, nope, we're not pressing charges. During 2007, the police looked at Patricia Morris's murder as part of Operation Anagram. Now, if you watch the case of Jesse Earl, you'll know Operation Anagram came about when they caught Peter Tobin. And they expected Peter Tobin to have murdered other people, so they started Operation Anagram to look at other cold cases and find if they could link Peter Tobin to them. When Patsy's dad, George Morris, heard about the 2 bodies that had been found in Peter Tobin's garden in Margate, something clicked in him, and he believed that Tobin was the murderer. And yes, clicked is a direct quote. George said something clicked, and he then believed that it could be Peter Tobin that killed Patricia. So the case was reviewed by Operation Anagram, but the family didn't really hear anything more of this, and then it wound down in 2011 when the police couldn't find any information to link any cold cases to Peter Tobin. Another year on, in 2008, at some point, I'm not quite sure what month, a man walks into a police station in Norfolk, which is 130 miles away here, and he walked in and he said, look, I killed Patricia. And I don't think he said Patricia. I think he said he killed someone at Hounslow Heath at the time Patricia was murdered. So the police looked into it, they saw Patricia's murder, and they charged him with it, they arrested him for it. But it later came out that this 42-year-old man had mental health issues, and it weren't a credible statement, so they had to let him go, and no charges were made. Staying in 2008, in February, police revealed that they were investigating a possible confession made by a serial killer. And that serial killer was Levi Bellfield. He was Isleworth born, and at the time he'd just been convicted of 2 murders and an attempted murder. Levi Bellfield's attacks were committed between 2003 and 2004, and they were in the area of Patricia's murder, although it were quite a few years later. And I also noticed here a slight thing, and I don't think it's much, but Levi Bellfield is known as the bus stop killer. And as we mentioned earlier, there was a possible sighting of Patricia in a bus stop, but I do think that's clutching at straws. I didn't read anywhere else that someone had made that connection. I just thought it was quite interesting, and like I said, clutching at straws, but it's a possible connection. As I said, Levi Bellfield made a confession. While on remand, he told his cellmate that he killed Patricia Morris. As the police were looking into this, they did realise that Levi had attended Feltham Comprehensive School with Patricia, and it's also said that they were boyfriend and girlfriend at one point. However, Patricia's family told the press that they hadn't known of their connection, they didn't even know they knew each other. Her sister said, "We did not know him. It was a shock when we found out they knew each other. Friends told us about it. It's horrendous." In 2011, Bellfield was further convicted of the murder of yet another schoolgirl. The schoolgirl was Millie Dowler. She'd been abducted and raped in 2002. Levi Bellfield was 12 years old at the time of Patricia's murder. A year later, at the age of 13, Bellfield got his first conviction for burglary. He was known to have played truant at school, and it's also known that he quite frequently skipped school and he hung about at Hounslow Heath while he should have been at school. So that's a major link here. She misses school, goes for Hounslow Heath, and is found in Hounslow Heath, and Bellfield's not at school on this day, and he's found hanging about quite often at Hounslow Heath. To make this even worse and more of a connection, Bellfield's ex-partners said that he absolutely hates blondes. He targeted them for attacks, and yes, Patricia Morris was blonde. This has triggered a lot of people to say that Patricia Morris's death could have been what started Bellfield's hate and violent obsession for blonde women. After it was revealed that Bellfield was being investigated for Patricia's murder, her dad, George Morris, stated that he was certain that Bellfield, as a teenage boy, would give him that threat that day. He was certain it was Bellfield. His direct quote is, "He's a local man, which is why it could have been him. And it's terrifying to think someone 12 or 13 could have done it." End quote. Levi Bellfield has not been charged with Patricia's murder, and it was reported in 2012 that he might have been ruled out as a suspect. In 2016, it was reported that links between Bellfield and other crimes had been reinvestigated because of new evidence. And although I think this is very speculative, people have said that Patricia's case could have been one of them. Although there were 20 cases that the police questioned Bellfield on. However, police subsequently announced that all lines of inquiry had been exhausted and they'd found no evidence to link Levi Bellfield to any other unsolved cases. Now, the website mylondon.news claims that police at some point found that at the time of Patricia's murder, Bellfield wasn't actually in that area. He was still at the rectorate in Hampton as a school, and he'd not moved to Feltham until after Patsy's death. But that's really confused me, because a lot of places claim that it were him, and even that article goes through to make it sound like it were him, and then it says that. And if you Google Levi Bellfield and the rectorate, not much comes up to tell you when. I did try my best and looked around to try and find out when Levi left the rectorate, but I couldn't find it, so I can't confirm whether that's true or not. But it would explain why Patricia's family didn't know anything about Levi Bellfield. So I am kind of going, well, it can't be Levi Bellfield. Then no when he has a child, a 12-year-old, gone all that way and murdered someone and no one's known about it, if you know what I mean. So if anyone can find that information about when Levi Bellfield left the rectorate and came to Hounslow, that would be massively helpful as information for this, because I just couldn't find it, and I promise I did look. And that's all I've got, other than that Patricia's murder is still unsolved. I'm sorry it's been quite a short one. It made a busy week last week, so we missed Saturdays because of my daughter's birthday. So I did need to try and get one that was a little bit shorter. I promise I'll try and make next week's a bit longer. But I'm trying to get a week ahead so I never have to miss an episode. What do you think about this? Because I think it's really strange. And I do think there's a lot of the kids that weren't saying things. Which is weird. If your friends skip school, and you might lie for them. But if they then get murdered, wouldn't you then come forward and say? 'Cause I think I would have at school. I think I'd have stuck up for my friend and be like, oh no, they've come to get the coat. When you go, right, that person's been murdered, you go, right, they didn't go and get the coat. They were skipping school. Oh, damn. And I also think it's quite strange that she's wearing 2 pairs of pants. I've worn 2 pairs of socks before. I've never worn 2 pairs of pants. Is that what people do? Is there a reason someone might do that? I don't get it. There were one thing that came to mind for a reason why a teenage girl might be wearing 2 pairs. But then I thought, well, no, because police would have been easily able to say that that's why they were doing it. But they didn't. Police said they'd never found out why. So I don't understand. Don't get me wrong, it's probably not to do with it. But I don't think we can rule that out. Can we rule? I don't know. I think that's so strange. I did miss out one bit. I don't know why it's not in my notes, but it's not. Peter Tobin did live in the area. That's it. I'm done. It's a strange case. Again, with not much information. And I don't know, sometimes having more information can be more confusing, and sometimes having less information can be more confusing. With this, it's just one of the things. I think it happens quite a lot when you know somebody that's had something tragic happened. It could all be made a lot more simple if we knew what were happening. If we knew that she had gone home and she were genuinely going back to school, she just wanted a coat. If she were wagging school, maybe she was still going home for a coat. And maybe she were making her way to her dad's. Maybe she were meeting someone in that field. Maybe it weren't just her wagging it and she got home to get a coat and found it was locked, so she was on her way back to the heath to meet a friend. She were under bushes. Was she already under bushes trying to get shelter? So much information, and as always, to be a fly on the wall and get that extra bit of information could make things a lot more informative. That's it. I'm rounding it off. If you found this informative, if you like my presentation and stuff, I don't like saying if you liked this video, because it's not a happy video. You shouldn't like the video. But if you did like the style, if you did like the presentation, please subscribe, please ring a bell. Put your comments down below in the comment box. I do generally read them, and I do generally use your thoughts and considering myself and reply. And if it is a very helpful comment, I'll pin it up as well. But I can only pin one, so don't get offended if I don't. Please do subscribe, please do share, please do ring the bell. Not that bothered about ringing the bell, but please subscribe, please share it. Till next week, guys. Bye.